moving their way south-eastwards. It does brighten up later on in the day across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but on the whole, middle of the week remaining unsettled, but for all of us, temperatures staying on the mild side for the time of year.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in a great British giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News Sunday. Happy St Patrick's Day if you're celebrating. Thank you for joining us this lunchtime. I'm Dawn Neeson with the next 2 hours, keeping you company on TV, online and on digital radio. Cracking show for you. Coming up this hour, has the penny dropped for the Tories? Plots are apparently rife in the Conservative Party as right-wing MPs reportedly unite with moderates to replace Rishi Sunak with Penny Mordaunt. But would a change in leader really save the Tories? Then, should we bring back conscription? The Latvian Foreign Minister says UK and other members should follow his country in adopting the Finnish model of national service in an effort to deter Russian aggression. So, should we bring back conscription? Would you join up? And London's best fish and chip shop has been ordered to remove a mural by council officials. Joining us later to find out exactly why. But this show is nothing without you and your views. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.com or message me on our socials. We're at GB News. But first, let's get the news headlines with the deliciously dressed in green, Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you, and good afternoon. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Transport Secretary Mark Harper says Rishi Sunak will lead the Tories into the next election. It comes after senior Tories were reported to have attempted to downplay claims of a Conservative plot to replace the Prime Minister with Penny Mordaunt. The move would mean a fourth leader of the party in just 5 years. Mr Harper says that unlike Labour, the Conservatives have a plan on delivering for the country.
We've got to show them, by the time of the election, two things. We've got to show them that we've got a plan, the plan is working and it's delivering for them. And I think we can see that it is on inflation and on taxes. We've also then got to show them that the Labour Party doesn't have a plan and will be a big risk. You know, for example, we know the Labour Party wants to spend £28 billion on their green plan. They've hidden the price tag now, but they don't know how to pay for it. That would mean taxes going up.
But Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth told GB News the government's priorities are all wrong.
Rishi Sunak is not acting in the national interest. It's reckless, it's irresponsible. He should name the date of a general election and stabilise matters. At the moment, he's more preoccupied with his own leadership and saving his own skin than governing in the national interest. And I think after 14 years, this is a pretty discredited government. He needs to name the date. I mean, but if he doesn't name the date soon, we could have a leadership election soon.
The Ministry of Defence says Grant Shapps was forced to abandon a trip to southern Ukraine last week for security reasons. British intelligence warned of a credible missile threat from Russia, saying the Kremlin had got wind of his visit. That's according to the Sunday Times. Mr Shapps was due to travel to Odessa a day after a missile hit the city, while the Ukrainian president and the Greek Prime Minister were visiting. 5 people were killed in the explosions, according to Ukrainian authorities. Meanwhile, the Latvian Prime Minister has told the Sunday Telegraph that Britain should consider conscription and a total defence model to deter Russian aggression. Latvia reintroduced the model last year, with all able-bodied men required to complete 11 months of military service. However, in January, the UK Armed Forces Minister James Heappey said any talk of the UK introducing conscription to the army if NATO goes to war with Russia was nonsense. That as Russians are casting their ballots on the final day of voting for the country's next president. Vladimir Putin, who's been in power since 1999, is expected to win another 6-year term with a landslide victory. The election comes just over 2 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The first 2 days of the vote saw dozens of incidents of vandalism at polling stations, with several people detained across Russia. Councils will have to consider whether residents support low-traffic neighbourhoods in their area before going ahead with the schemes. The draft guidance is due to come into force this summer. They're designed to encourage cycling and walking by limiting driving in side roads and include wider pavements and barriers to restrict vehicles. LTNs often use signs and bollards to prevent traffic being able to drive along a certain route. As well as local residents, businesses and emergency services will also need to approve of the move. A volcano in Iceland has erupted for a 4th time in just 3 months. Previous eruptions destroyed roads and forced a town to evacuate. Fountains of molten rock could be seen soaring into the night sky from fissures in the ground. Authorities had warned for weeks that an eruption was imminent just south of Iceland's capital, Reykjavik. And Steve Harley, best known as the frontman of British rock band Cockney Rebel, has died at the age of 73.
Come up and sing it to make me smile.
The band enjoyed success in 1975 with the #1 hit, Make Me Smile. Steve Harley had still been touring until recently, but cancelled dates to have treatment for cancer. His daughter Greta says he died peacefully with his family by his side. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Dawn.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Right, let's get straight to today's story, shall we? The leader of the Lib Dems, Sir Ed Davey, just in case you've forgotten, has called for a once-in-a-generation election. He called for transformational change to bring the blue wall tumbling down. He accused Labour and the Conservatives of tinkering around the edges and trying to cloak themselves in the costume of change. but they're both really saying keep things the same. He also poked fun at the Prime Minister over the calling of the election. Let's have a listen to what he said on that, shall we?
Now, of course, we don't yet know when election day will be. We don't know because it's in the hands of just one man. It's pretty much the only thing left that Rishi Sunak controls. He certainly doesn't control his party, certainly not his cabinet, certainly not the healthcare crisis or the economy.
Cracking bit of stand-up there, eh? Joining me now is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley, who's holding her aching sides and explaining exactly what is going on with the Lib Dems today.
Well, it's the Lib Dems spring conference today. This is the sort of meeting of the party faithful. It was a very excitable hall full of people who've come up and down the country to watch Ed Davey. In terms of what he was talking about, there were a lot of attacks specifically on the Conservatives. I thought it was quite notable how he pretty much laid off Labour and Keir Starmer altogether, which might get tongues wagging that there could be some sort of pact between the Lib Dems and Labour later down the line. There were a couple of moments where it seemed as though Ed Davey was very, very keen to sort of steal the Tories' clothes. He talked about reversing Rishi Sunak's cuts to the British Army. Now, a strong defence budget is territory which is traditionally the Conservatives, but obviously in recent months and years we've seen Rishi Sunak and his government shy away from that 3% GDP commitment to defence. Ed Davey stepped in there and said that that is something that he would do, to huge cheers from his audience. He talked a lot too about specific Conservative seats, and I think that's something which we're going to hear a lot more from in the Lib Dems in the coming months. Traditionally, the Lib Dems don't tend to do particularly well in general elections, but they do very well indeed in by-elections, because they are very, very good at getting their resources on the ground when they're targeting, when they're really pinpointing a specific area. They've actually won 4 by-elections in the last couple of years, which I'm pretty sure is a record for any party. It sounds as though they are going to be treating the next general election essentially like a series of by-elections. They'll be looking at target seats across the country, probably 20 or 30 target seats, and they will be putting all of their resources into those seats. And it's quite likely that in at least some of those seats, Labour will hardly bother to campaign at all. There'll be some element of sort of tactical voting. Quite a few of those seats are belonging to sitting cabinet ministers. Jeremy Hunt's seat in Surrey is a target Lib Dem seat, and Penny Mordaunt's seat down in Portsmouth is a target Lib Dem seat too. So the Lib Dems looked set on humiliating the Conservative Party, and it felt as though that was sort of the theme of that speech today. Get out Tory MPs and get Lib Dem MPs in, but not much mention of Labour.
Very interesting, isn't it, Olivia, the fact that there could be a pact between the two parties, although they both have denied it, haven't they?
They have denied it, and it sounds unlikely that there'll be a sort of official pact between the two parties. But we have seen in previous elections there's some element of tactical voting, and even if it's not announced in the sort of national media, there can be sometimes agreements between associations of Labour and the Lib Dems. And even if it isn't as official as that, you can see voters taking it into their own hands to get involved in tactical voting. In a recent by-election, actually, the Lib Dems managed to lose their deposit in a seat where they'd previously come third, and it was thought that was because Labour stood a much, much higher chance of winning that seat up in red wall constituencies. So I think we can possibly expect some element of tactical voting between the Lib Dems and Labour, even if it isn't official. And I thought it was very telling, actually, that Ed Davey almost entirely laid off criticism of Keir Starmer. The only moment where there was a little bit of criticism was when he talked about Gaza and Israel. Obviously, the Lib Dems have been calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Israel from the very beginning of this crisis. So that's one clear blue dividing line between the Lib Dems and Labour. Other than that, it was all the Tories that Davey was laying into.
Olivia, seeing as Ed Davey has set the stall out for us, talking about the Tories, should we carry on? Rishi Sunak's not going to be a happy bunny again today, part 356. He's being portrayed as an indecisive wimp, and Penny Mordaunt is set to take over the reins. What do you make of what the papers are saying today?
Well, there was all sorts of briefings and counter-briefings in the Sunday papers this morning. There is this rumour that Penny Mordaunt is pitching herself to be the next Conservative leader, and importantly, not Conservative leader after the election, but before it. Her allies would like to see her lead the Conservative Party into the general election rather than Rishi Sunak. This was reported yesterday. We were digging around yesterday, and it did indeed sound as though there had been some sort of meeting going on. The Sunday Telegraph now suggests that actually what was going on is that right-wing MPs were sort of using Penny Mordaunt. They were suggesting that they would like to see Penny Mordaunt become the next leader so that they could spur a leadership contest. Penny Mordaunt is popular among the centrists. They want to get the centrists on side, spur a leadership contest, and then put in their own candidate, be that Suella Braverman or perhaps Priti Patel. So those are the rumours. Rishi Sunak, for his part, his allies are saying that Penny Mordaunt has no values, that she is just an empty vessel. It sounds as though he wants to show that there is a clear line between himself and Penny over those trans issues. Penny Mordaunt, for some on the right of the party, Penny Mordaunt has never managed to win back plaudits after saying at the dispatch box that trans women are women. Rishi Sunak, it seems, wants to mine that bit of reluctance, that lack of trust in the Leader of the Commons. But the very fact that the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Commons seem to be pretty much at each other's throats behind closed doors over this issue shows the extent to which the Conservative Party is divided. And it's not surprising. Today it was revealed that polls show Conservatives are now lower than they were any time since Liz Truss's budget, disastrous budget last year. So that's where the Conservatives are sitting. And there are some people now saying that in the Conservative Party that yes, it would be bad to replace a leader, a fourth leader in as many years, but as things are going, Rishi Sunak cannot hold on.
Oh, gosh. Olivia, I'm not sure you're helping, my lovely. I know we've sent you up to spend the afternoon with the Lib Dems, but, I mean, it's like rats fighting in a sack, isn't it? Olivia Utley, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed on what's happening with the Lib Dems. Now, let's see what my brilliant panel today make of all this. I'm joined by author and broadcaster, the lovely Amy Nicole-Turner, and the equally lovely, I thought about it, broadcaster Mike Parry. Thank you both for joining me, and happy St Patrick's Day to you both.
Indeed.
Happy St Patrick's Day. I'm the only one wearing green, but hey, whatever. Now, the Lib Dem conference it seemed quite excitable, didn't it? What do you make of what you've heard Olivia say? I'm going to come to you first, Mike, on this one.
Well, you used a very good expression just now. You said stand-up comedian. I don't think you said comedian. I thought you said stand-up, right? And that was after we'd seen some pictures of Ed Davey walking around the stage, waving like this. And it's a great description of Ed Davey and the image he has of himself. And, you know, everybody loves me. He seems to constantly have this sort of grimace on his face and calling for people's resignations, but I don't hear many policies. And I think also that he has this huge ability to forget that he has been very responsible in the scandal that has surrounded the post office sub-postmasters and mistresses, because he was a minister at the time who simply said it wouldn't have been worthwhile him talking to sub-postmasters and mistresses whose numbers were building up. Didn't he have the intelligence to think to himself, well, hang on, for the last 10 years, there's only been 3 sub-postmaster mistresses who've had a problem, and now we've got thousands. Something might have gone wrong.
He's not here to defend himself.
I'll defend him. There's no problem. I'll defend him on that one, because now who is the compensation in the hands of? Who could right the wrong with the sub-postmasters? Yes, Kemi Badenoch came out and said, of course, they should get their compensation, but the Tory party are holding it up and keeping that money back. And I think that's probably because they can't foot the bill at the moment, so they're hoping to kick the can down the line so Labour inherit even more money.
But it's such a mess. It's such a mess. It's a hugely complicated structure now to get all the payments out to the people who deserve them. Seriously, it is now such an enormous problem. It's going to involve millions, if not billions of pounds, and they're simply trying to work it out. But surely at the start, Amy, you must agree with me, Ed Davey could have done something about it and chose not to.
Yeah, I'm in and out on that, because I think he's a convenient scapegoat at the moment. But if we go back to what Olivia was talking about with the prospect of Penny Mordaunt...
I was going to say, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of the post office.
Sure.
Davey has got questions to answer. But Rishi Sunak also appears to have questions to answer this morning. If you read any of the papers today, take your pick. I'm sure he probably isn't. They're not exactly complimentary. I mean, implied that it's an indecisive wimp and there is a cunning plan to get Penny Mordaunt in.
It's really funny, isn't it? It's like they're just throwing anything at the wall and hoping something sticks. Because I think when Rishi stood up at conference, we thought we were getting more of this right-wing side of the Conservative Party. But now he seems to have shifted back over to the centre and thinking, oh, no, it's not the red wall I'm worried about, it's the blue wall. I think he's worried about all the walls.
I've lost
at this point.
What walls are what colour.
But ultimately, I think he thought his national insurance cut, I think he thought that would impress. But actually, the 2p cut coincided with a 2-point drop in polling. So now they are the lowest, as Olivia said, popularity since the Liz Truss.
Do you think the whole Penny Mordaunt thing, I think it's in at least 3 of the papers there on the front page, the whole Penny Mordaunt thing, they're describing her as a stalking horse, which usually means they're going to use her
that's mad.
Get someone else in.
Why would she want to be a stalking horse? Her ambition is to be Prime Minister. But what I don't get is when she threw her hat into the ring when Liz Truss became Prime Minister, and then again Rishi Sunak, although that was obviously a sort of coronation to follow Liz Truss. But I was reading all sorts of politicians anonymously saying, oh, Penny's no good. She doesn't have the, she doesn't have an eye for detail. These are accusations made against her. I don't know her personally. They were saying she doesn't work hard enough, she doesn't grasp her subject, she doesn't get around enough. And also, she is very middle of the road. If they're going to have a new Prime Minister to try and boost Rishi Sunak's right-wing appeal, it's not Penny Mordaunt.
But I think that's exactly why Penny Mordaunt's name has been brought up, because they don't want to boost that right-wing appeal. They want to move back to the centre, and the best option for a centrist voice is perhaps Penny Mordaunt. She's
I don't think so. The only people...
she's got the support of people like David Davis, Bob Seeley, Alicia Kearns is a very popular figure in the Conservative Party at the moment. Caroline Noakes, what we might refer to as the Tory wets, which I think actually have a more of a general appeal rather than
I think they're wet enough already.
To the party members and the country as a whole.
I think they're wet enough already. When I saw Lord Cameron get out of the 4x4 walking up Downing Street, I thought this can't be true. This is a man who single-handedly, in my view, turned the Tory party into something like the Lib Dems. He ran a coalition government with them and seemed to like the Lib Dem politicians more than he liked his own people.
The bottom line with me is, it doesn't matter whether it's Grant Shapps, Penny Mordaunt, Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick, Priti Patel, Father Christmas. Does it actually matter who is leading the Conservative Party at the moment?
No, I think it absolutely does, because what we're seeing is this right-wing takeover of the party. And as figures like Suella Braverman, figures like Kemi Badenoch rise up the ranks, I think it pushes people to think that the Tory party is morphing into a UKIP party. And I think that's why now they want to pull it back to the centre to be palatable to the mainstream.
But what good is that, Amy? Because then, if they're pulling back to the centre, there is no clear blue water between them and Labour anymore. All Labour do now is imitate Tory policies, and Tories imitate Labour policies. And I think the movement... I heard Ian Duncan-Smith talking this morning, OK? And he made it very clear, if we adopted what we regard as traditional Tory values, low tax, small state, people standing on their own 2 feet, that at least will invite another group of voters in.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. One very, very quick answer. Amy, who would you like to be the next Prime Minister?
Well, Keir Starmer, but...
OK.
Not Keir Starmer.
Is there not Keir Starmer running?
No, but I don't want Keir Starmer, please. It'll be chaos.
Give me Carol Vorderman.
I wasn't aware she... Would Carol Vorderman get your vote?
No, definitely not.
Right, OK. Well, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and so much more, just go to our website, gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Sunday, St Patrick's Day, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. Should we, while you're having your Sunday lunch relaxing, bring back conscription? Yeah, get off that sofa, you. The Latvian Foreign Minister says UK and other members should follow his country in adopting the Finnish model of national service in an effort to deter Russian aggression. So, what do you reckon? Should we bring back conscription? Would it be a good thing for young men or women? All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
Mark Dolan Tonight. Weekends from 9 p.m.
I've personally been very torn on whether Prince Harry should have full police protection when he's in the United Kingdom. On the one hand, why should taxpayers fork out for somebody that's left the country and the institution? He is no longer a working, serving royal. But I don't think it matters. He is one of the most famous men in the world, and whether he's a royal or not, he is an ambassador for this country. And he still does good. Charitable causes, the Invictus Games, and he is still a nice and charming guy with a heart. And whilst he has left the royal family and departed these shores, he was and remains the son of King Charles. That is a biological fact. Well, let's hope so. And it wasn't his choice to be born into royalty. It wasn't his choice to be the son of the king. And for that reason, I think he should have equal police protection to his brother William when he is in this country. He couldn't be a more high-profile figure, and unfortunately, like all the royals, Harry will be a target for some very bad people. I fear that if, God forbid, anything happened to him or his family, the authorities would have blood on their hands. So, it's not often that I back Prince Harry, but on this one, he has my support. Look what happened to his poor mum, killed in a Paris tunnel in the 1990s with an allegedly drunk chauffeur. A top royal security insider recently told me that Diana would still be with us today if she had had top royal protection at that time. So let's not make the same mistake twice. Prince Harry needs full protection and the best we've got. Yes, he might be a numpty, but he's our numpty.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, should we bring back conscription? One key NATO ally says we should. The Latvian Foreign Minister, they've got a very long board with Russia, by the way, Latvia, says UK and other members should follow his country in adopting the Finnish model of national service in an effort to deter Russian aggression. Considering the growing threat from the east, is it inevitable we actually see this happen? Oh, blimey. Let's see what my panel make of this one. It's a bit heavy for a Sunday afternoon, Amy. I mean, would you sign up, lovely?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
And the first time somebody asked me that, I felt like I should be all like embarrassed about it. But actually, I think I speak for most people in this country.
What about if conscription means you wouldn't have a choice?
Well, exactly. And I don't think we need to go to that level, do we? Do we?
Latvia, I think we might.
So Latvia have conscription, actually, and then they want to do this Finnish model where you get conscripted for 1 year of military service. And when I looked into it, it's more just military training, so that you're ready to go, which I actually thought is a good idea. But I don't think we need to do conscription, because if you do that, you get a workforce, an army that don't really want to be there, which is not going to be the most productive army. I think what we need to do, first of all, is put everything into making the army attractive, making the army an amazing job, like perhaps it was a few years ago.
Fair point.
And then I think we would see much more voluntary people wanting to join voluntarily. Our national defence spending under this government has been eroded, and therefore the job prospects of anyone in doing service have also been eroded. The conditions they live in, the payments after they finish their service, the support for their families. If all that was boosted, we would not need to have these discussions about conscription.
Mike, it's a fair point, isn't it? We are having trouble recruiting for all our armed forces, Army, Navy and Air Force.
Yeah, we are.
Navy in particular is struggling.
Yeah.
We don't have enough armed forces. They wouldn't fill Wembley out, to be honest with you, at the moment, the personnel we have.
I mean, we have to, mothball ships because we haven't got enough people joining the Royal Navy to sail them. Now, I've been to Latvia, and Latvia's a great country, OK? But it's right on the front line.
They've got a very long border with Russia.
133 miles. Along with Estonia and Lithuania, OK? So it's a very sensitive part of the world. Now, I kind of agree with Amy a bit. The problem is the army's too small now to give over 2 or 3% of it to training new young men who don't want to be in the army. Do you see what I mean? Because it's a huge job. Now, if we'd have started 20 or 30 years ago with this system, which is civilian training, and you do 3 or 4 days each quarter, I think it was in Latvia, that's the way they started, OK? So eventually you end up being able to be called up and fully trained after about 4 or 5 years. It's a long-term thing. I mean, the first time I got shocked by the presence of the military in civilian areas was the first time I went to Israel, and I was on the beach, and these 2 beautiful girls sitting next to me were sitting there with machine guns, literally, because they were part of the, the civilian army, which they have.
Just because they were sitting next to you, Mike.
Well, it's probably trying to keep me away, absolutely. But you know what I mean? I mean, it's shocking to think, my God, what are they doing with these machine guns on the beach? But they're ready and on alert all the time. But I do not believe that the youth of today would respond to conscription in the way, for instance, my father did pre-war for national service, because, of course, it was different times. But I do think somebody's got to get a grip of our whole defence strategy, which is appalling, and find us ways to spend the money better, because defence procurement is one of the most wasteful areas of government expenditure, and it can be used properly for a training policy like this.
They have wasted millions. Did you hear?
They've wasted billions.
There was an example of they built a load of tanks.
Yes, about 400.
And then it turned out that the tanks were so loud that people couldn't be around them, so they just had to be discarded.
People couldn't get in them.
Ridiculous things like that.
People couldn't get in them because the vibration in the tank was sending people deaf.
Right.
I mean, unbelievable. You know what I mean?
I think the interesting thing about conscription is that it's aimed at 18 to 27-year-olds. Now, who is the current government the most unpopular with is 18 to 24-year-olds, right? So if you're going to have conversations about conscription, you need to give young people something that they feel is worth fighting for. At the moment, I don't think they're the most patriotic bunch, because what has the country given them? Years of austerity. They can't buy a house. They have the lowest living standard. Like, the inequality levels we have not seen since the Victorian era. It's not a popular age group. They're going to step forward and say, I want to stand up for this country.
I think if you ask most young people between about the age of 18 and 23, they vaguely know who Vladimir Putin was. Do you know what I mean? Start to think he's causing a bit of trouble, isn't he? Whereas if you're age 21 and you live in the Baltic states that we've just named, you can see it across your border. That's Russia. They're the people who invaded Ukraine. We could be next. So it's a much more imminent threat. Finland's doing a great job. Spent a lot of money. I think they've upped their budget to about 6%, and I think it's a great model. But whether we've got the will, the capacity, or the money to replicate it, I don't know.
I think on the human side of things, Amy, given the problems we have with gang crime and knife culture in this country, it might be a positive thing for young men to be conscripted, to do some kind of national service.
Do you mean conscripting people from, like, young offenders? Yeah. I actually saw a really interesting interview with Simon Weston on this very channel. You can look it up on YouTube. And he said this idea, to be in the army, you have to really, really want to be there, and that's what makes a strong
totally
defense.
agree. If it seems like a punishment...
It sounds like a really good idea in practice, but if it, like as Mike says, if it seems like a punishment, it just wouldn't work practically.
That's right.
What I reckon is a good idea, let's conscript the politicians who made the decisions that started off the aggression in the first place.
Rishi Sunak on the front line?
Well, I see.
No,
you wanted me?
Amy, I wouldn't give most of our politicians a machine gun, because anything could happen. I don't think they'd be able to find the trigger, honest to God.
But I think that's why a lot of people have a problem with this people keep saying the word conscription, because what we're seeing is politicians making decisions which are leading to wars, and then who serves in the army first? It's our our working class boys.
Yeah.
So that's why people have a problem with this.
Yeah. You see, the other issue is that we've got a very professional army. Bringing in conscripts will just lower the professionalism because they won't get up to standard. But we do train people all around the world. We've had more people training Ukrainian soldiers on Salisbury Plain here than anywhere else. So if we can do it for the Ukrainians, we should be able to do it for ourselves. It needs a rethink.
And that's where we'll have a rethink. Always good to end on a rethink. That's why we have to leave that, unfortunately. We are running out of time. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News Sunday, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. But first, let's get the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Transport Secretary Mark Harper says Rishi Sunak will lead the Tories into the next election. It comes after senior Tories were reported to have attempted to downplay claims of a Conservative plot to replace the Prime Minister with Penny Mordaunt. The move would mean a fourth leader of the party in just 5 years. Mr Harper says that, unlike Labour, the Conservatives have a plan on delivering for the country. The Ministry of Defence says Grant Shapps was forced to abandon a trip to southern Ukraine last week for security reasons. British intelligence warned of a credible missile threat from Russia, saying the Kremlin had got wind of his visit. That's according to the Sunday Times. Mr Shapps was due to travel to Odessa a day after a missile hit the city while the Ukrainian president and the Greek Prime Minister were visiting. 5 people were killed in the explosions, according to Ukrainian authorities. The widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was cheered by voters outside the Russian embassy in Berlin. Yulia Navalnaya was protesting on the final day of voting for the country's next president. Vladimir Putin, who's been in power since 1999, is expected to win another 6-year term with a landslide victory. The election comes just over 2 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Work on the M25 in Surrey is on schedule to reopen for Monday rush hour. National Highways says good progress is being made after the unprecedented closure. Motorists reported miles of tailbacks yesterday on the approach to the 5-mile closure between junctions 10 and 11. And Steve Harley, best known as the frontman of British rock band Cockney Rebel, has died at the age of 73.
Come up and see me to make me smile.
The band enjoyed success in 1975 with the #1 hit, Make Me Smile. Steve Harley had been touring until recently but had to cancel dates to have treatment for cancer. His daughter Greta says he died peacefully with his family by his side. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Dawn.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, remember, you can get in touch about all the stories we're discussing today by emailing me on gbviews@gbnews.com or message me on our socials @gbnews. Loads more coming up on today's show now. London's best fish and chip shop has been ordered to remove the mural by council officials. Join us in a moment to find out exactly why, though. All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson, and you're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
...2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your tellies, online and on digital radio. Now, before we move, I want to tell you about this. Conservative MP Elliot Colburn left the House of Commons in stunned silence last month when he revealed details of his suicide bid during Prime Minister's questions. He sits down for an interview with Gloria De Piero, where he describes his feelings in the build-up to trying to end his life in December 2021 and urges others who need help to ask for it. Let's have a quick listen, shall we?
Felt as if there's no point going on anymore. You know, there's absolutely no point. You are unwanted. No one wants to see or hear from you, and you cannot do anything right. So why waste everyone else's time and your own time? You might as well remove yourself from the equation now. And after hours of stewing on that day, I took out my notepad from my bag, I wrote a goodbye message and tried to do something really stupid. And I'm glad it didn't work.
You can watch the full interview at 2 o'clock, so that's in 25 minutes or so stay tuned. And believe me, it is an interview that no man or woman who loves a man wants to miss, because male suicide in this country is at catastrophic levels, so please do tune in for that. Now, London's best fish and chip shop has been ordered to remove a Union flag by council officials. The Golden Chippy in Greenwich, that's in South London, has been asked to remove its mural depicting the Union flag being held by a humanoid fish. You can see it there. It's a bit of fun, isn't it? It made me laugh. There you go. The slogan saying, "A great British meal," because it's been deemed inappropriate for the area. Joining me now is GB News national reporter Theo Chikomba to explain exactly why it's inappropriate. Theo, lovely to see you, with hopefully a nice bag of fish and chips there.
Yeah, well, when it comes to fish and chips, we all know they're a part of a British tradition, and the Golden Chippy is an award-winning restaurant, and for years they've been serving the community here in Greenwich, and even today on a Sunday they are fully packed today. But this is the issue. Here we've got a mural and which says a great British meal, and this has been called, it's been an issue for residents who live in this area who've complained to Greenwich Council, who say it's inappropriate considering it's in a conservation area. But is it really inappropriate? Here's what some of the local people we've been speaking to had to say.
I only probably got down because of the flag, didn't they? Like, what's wrong with it? It looks all right, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? Look at some of the other graffiti they've got around in Greenwich. They don't want to take that down, do they? But when you've got something like this that's half decent, they want to remove it.
Fantastic artwork. I really like it. Reminds me of Banksy. So if it was a Banksy there, they wouldn't complain. And so why can't other artists who do fantastic work like that also have an opportunity to lighten up the streets joyfully?
Well, those are the views here from people who live in this local area. But I'm kindly joined by Chris, the owner. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. You've been here for 20 years now. Tell me how this issue has come up.
This issue has come up. I've got so many international people that come here from different places, tourists. And they like taking pictures, selfies, blah, blah, blah. So they come and stand against this wall here. They take pictures. It's only been up for about a month. And it's been very, very popular. I don't want to believe that any of the locals are complaining that this is too loud or anything like that. It's just they say it needs planning permission. How a little thing like this needs planning permission, I don't know. But this is not Greenwich Council, this is Royal Borough of Greenwich now. So they're cracking up a little bit.
And just finally, how did this come about? Are you working with an artist in this local area?
I've got a local guy that does murals. So he said, would you like me to do something for you? I said, yes, why not? So I gave him £250 and I said, make sure you leave a bit of space for people to stand there so they can take some selfies or pictures or whatever they want to do from Golden Chippy. And it's been extremely popular. And not one person has come to me and said, that looks terrible. So I cannot imagine the person that complained about this. I think it's just council.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. In terms of popularity, though, we've seen people come here as family members coming together to take picture here, and they say it's not an issue. But at the moment, it's still here for now, and the council will be providing further information whether or not this is definitely going to go away.
Theo, that's ridiculous. One of the lovely ladies you interviewed there, she said if it was a Banksy, no one would be complaining, would they? I bet the council wouldn't be getting a knickers in a twist if it is a Banksy, would they? I mean, it looks great. It makes people smile. Plus, it's good for business.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what everyone here who we've been speaking to is saying. They're saying, what's the issue? I don't quite understand. Residents we've been speaking to all morning saying, don't really understand what the issue is. Probably one person did say, maybe it shouldn't be here. It should just be a blank wall. But apart from that, everyone else seems to be enjoying it. And everyone's going inside and eating the fish and chips.
Brilliant. Well, I hope you enjoy you deserve it. You worked hard today, young man. That's Theo Chicomba down in Greenwich Forest with, well, one of London's best fish and chip shops, which seems to upset the local council. What do you make of this, Mike? It's ridiculous, isn't it?
I think it's pathetic. The Greenwich Council is very heavily Labour. I think it's 52-3 or something like that, right. You know what I mean? So
you like fish and chips, then?
Well, no, it's not that. What I suspect is, right, I suspect it's the Union Jack that they object to and not the mural itself, OK? Because we all know that within inside the Labour Party there's a self-loathing about being British and a dislike of the traditions of their country. They would call that colonial because it's a Union Jack. It's a beautiful mural. It sits outside his shop, right? They come along, buy their fish and chips, want their picture taken in the white space to the right of the flag. Do you see what I mean? And it's a wonderful business initiative. You said it's good for business. It's good for the area. People are coming from all over the world, literally, who are in London just to go to that fish and chip shop to buy the fish and chips and have their picture taken in that mural. real. Now, a few years ago, that owner, very enterprising man, had a 17-foot high sign above his shop, OK? Same sort of thing, but he was told to take it down because it was obtrusive to the local area, and I can perhaps understand a little bit of that. Okay. But they've clearly got the hump that he's shown the initiative to design a much smaller one on the wall next to his shop with the Union Jack on it, and that's what they hate. I think they're pathetic.
Hang on a minute.
I intensely dislike them for doing this, and I wish they would all just get real.
Go, Amy, get away.
For consistency, weren't you one of the voices who got rather wound up by the rainbow flag at King's Cross Station?
No.
Or would you be happy if that was like, that said, you know, trans rights are rights and had a big rainbow flag?
I don't care what it says. I honestly don't care what it says. I think it's a great marketing ploy. I think it entertains the locals. People come to see it. I don't care what it says.
No, I agree. And I think that little bit of local democracy shows that it's wanted there. However, I know you brought up Banksy, and actually Banksies have been covered up by local councils. There was an example in Glasgow.
Usually to protect them.
Because they want to protect the tradition of the area. So it's kind of like preservation of the oldie world.
Do you think that...
So say you have like Coronation Street, Cobble
Do you think
Street,
that detracts from the area?
And then you put a massive anthropomorphic fish on the side of the cobble.
I mean, Amy,
do you think that's the problem?
Does that detract from that street or that area? It lightens it up. It's lovely.
I think it lightens it up. I agree with you, and I think the locals agree with you. But I think the thinking behind the council would be, oh, we have to preserve this because it's a certain way and it's tradition. And normally on this channel, you're all for tradition and you want to keep things as they are.
It's got a traditional flag in it. That's what I like about it.
I feel like you wouldn't be as hot on that anthropomorphic fish if it wasn't holding the Union Jack.
No,
if it was holding
not at
like
all.
a Palestinian flag.
Not at all. The thing is, the Union Jack's a very colourful flag, and that's why it's a nice, colourful sign. Now, when I do live shows, right, I take along a cardboard cutout of myself, because people like to have their picture taken next to Mike Porky-Parry when I'm there, OK? And it makes people stay. You know, it's something to take a picture of, do you see what I mean?
No,
Not just a picture of the shop. And I think it's a horrendous attack on business, on the fish and chip holder and the local people.
He's a shrewd businessman, though, because he's going to have a queue all the way down the road.
Until he's got to paint over it.
And then he'll do something else.
The council are making him paint over it. It's disgraceful.
It lives just down the road and he is from Northern Cyprus. It's the one that's actually looking at it.
I think they said it's out of character with the area. And it's not to do with the Union Jack. Can we just make that clear?
Well, how do you know that?
Well, of course it's not. They would have done it with any art.
Oh,
they
you
just
don't know that, Amy. I'm sorry. I think you're too trusting.
If he did it in Bristol...
Amy, I'm going to leave you with the mental image of two Mike Parrys, the real one and a cardboard cutout.
Absolutely.
Because you need that in your life. Right, oh my God, blimey.
Who doesn't?
I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Sunday, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. Councils ignore local opposition to low-traffic neighbourhoods and 20-mile-an-hour zones. Could be stripped of their powers to issue penalties. Could this be the beginning of the end for those low-traffic neighbourhoods? All of that to come with GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far now.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they commit a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay. They show up for work. There's a protection they are owed. beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use
if you
it.
commit,
There's no offer involved in the NHS.
But there is an offer, because at the end of the day, like, you earn it, you should figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simple.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, councils that ignore local opposition to low traffic neighbourhoods and 20-mile-an-hour zones could be stripped of their powers to issue penalties. Yay! Draft guidance due to be published today will state that authorities must gain support from local residents and businesses, emergency services, before introducing new LTN. Makes perfect sense to me, Amy.
Well, I had a look at the research that led to this, and it was 4 years in development. It had cross-party consensus all the way through. The biggest cause of child death in Wales was road traffic incidences, and if you're hit by a car at 20 miles an hour, you're 5 times more likely to die. So it protects children, it saves money for the NHS, and it just makes sense when you boil it down.
But what about the local one we've just had installed in ours, where you've got a dual-lane carriageway? There's no access on either side to pedestrians or schools or anything. No one can get to it. Why is that 20 mile an hour?
With those ones, though, the local authority can apply for it to be changed to a 30. It just swaps it round. So it used to be blanket 30, now it's blanket 20.
But they don't. This is my objection to them. First of all, 20 miles an hour at 4:30 a.m. in the morning when there's nobody there is ludicrous. It's part of the war against the motorist. It actually knackers cars going that slow, believe me. And because of the gearing of a car, it pushes out more filth into the air when a car's having to chug along at 20 than it does if it was going at 30. And as for the low traffic zones, or whatever they're called, that again is just war on the motorists, which pushes tons and tons of traffic onto main roads and causes terrible pollution in the atmosphere.
I think it does the opposite and saves your tyres. If you hit a pothole at 30, you're getting a new tyre. Hit it at 20.
Never mind the potholes. This is all about, allegedly, the pollution of the air. Air is clean in some of these areas.
Your car.
Sorry?
You were talking about knackering your car. I've knackered my car by driving over a pothole too fast.
Well, I'm sure you have, but it also knackers the engine of the car far more seriously if it's stuttling along, and the concentration of the driver to keep an eye on that speedometer, keep it under 20. Have you seen the figures this morning about the number of fines? 60 and 70,000 fines a year in some towns where the 20-mile-an-hour limit has been brought in, and penalising people for driving into the low traffic zones.
I've seen the figures over the 4-year development of this. Child deaths went down. That's the figure
I'm very pleased at that, and they should be controlled to 20 miles an hour outside schools, outside hospitals, and areas where children are in parks. OK, that should be done.
Quickly, surely it's a good idea to consult with the residents, though, Amy.
Yeah, possibly, but show them this evidence.
Oh, possibly.
Well, yeah, I love a bit of local democracy, but I think that
give people a say in how they live.
But what I'm saying is, what are you going to put in front of them? Because there's a lot of press around this that reminds me of the ULEZ stuff, which is actually very, very biased. So what I would put forward is the House of Commons debate on this subject, and then let them decide. And I'm pretty sure they'll decide in the end. These make sense.
I think Sadiq Khan is an example of a mayor who has a war against motorists.
You sound a bit biased there.
I'm motoring into the weather here. I'm Dawn Neeson with GB News Sunday. There's loads more coming up, but let's have a look at the blooming weather, shall we? Hope it's nice.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, for the week ahead, it's remaining changeable across the board. For most of the week, it will be fairly mild, but towards the end of the week into the weekend, it does look like it will turn briefly colder. So for the rest of Sunday, still got low pressure generally in charge across the country. But any showers generally fizzling out as the evening goes on. So some fairly clear skies developing across England and Wales, but it doesn't last long in the west. Another band of cloud and rain beginning to work its way in. So by the end of the night, clearest of the skies out towards the east and maybe across Northern Ireland. And for all of us, it is going to be a mild one. Temperatures not falling much lower than 5 to 7 degrees. So into Monday morning, a bright start in the east, but the cloud and rain across central parts will move its way eastwards as the day goes on. Behind it, some drier and brighter weather for a time. This transfers towards the east into the afternoon, and that allows another band of cloud and rain to work its way in from the west. So quite a wet end to the day for Northern Ireland, but for many, another mild day, temperatures up to 17 degrees in the southeast. Tuesday, for a lot of us, is going to be a rather cloudy picture. Outbreaks of rain moving their way southeastwards. It does brighten up later on in the day across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but on the whole, middle of the week remaining unsettled. But for all of us, temperatures staying on the mild side for the time of year.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner?
You've won £18,000.
I'm flipping heck. I don't know what to say.
Enter our massive spring giveaway with 3 big seasonal prizes to be won. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello Hello and welcome to GB News Sunday. Happy St Patrick's Day if you're celebrating. Hope you're having a wonderful time. Thank you for joining us at this lunchtime, though. I'm Dawn Neeson, and for the next hour, I'll be keeping you company on telly, online and on digital radio. Cracking show. For this hour, we've got Has the Penny Dropped for the Tories? Plots are apparently rife in the Conservative Party as right-wing MPs reportedly unite with moderates to replace Rishi Sunak with Penny Mordaunt. But would a change in leader really save the Tories? Then a nurse has claimed that not all people who have babies might call themselves a she or a woman or a mum. So I want to know, do you think a man can give birth, basically? And a special exhibition at the V&A about Punch and Judy has described Margaret Thatcher as a villain, piling her in with Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden. I'm asking, is Maggie Thatcher really that much of a villain? But even though I've got a brilliant panel here, this show is nothing without you and your views. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today, or anything else you want to gossip about, basically. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.com or message me on our socials, very simple, @gbnews. But first, it's the all-important news headlines with Green Goddess Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Transport Secretary Mark Harper says Rishi Sunak will lead the Tories into the next election. It comes after senior Tories were reported to have attempted to downplay claims of a Conservative plot to replace the Prime Minister with Penny Mordaunt. The move would mean a fourth leader of the party in just 5 years. Mr Harper says that unlike Labour, the Conservatives have a plan on delivering for the country.
We've got to show them, by the time of the election, two things. We've got to show them that we've got a plan, the plan is working and it's delivering for them. And I think we can see that it is on inflation and on taxes. We've also then got to show them that the Labour Party doesn't have a plan and will be a big risk. You know, for example, we know the Labour Party wants to spend £28 billion on their green plan. They've hidden the price tag now, but they don't know how to pay for it. That would mean taxes going up.
But Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth told GB News the government's priorities are all wrong.
Rishi Sunak is not acting in the national interest. It's reckless, it's irresponsible. He should name the date of a general election and stabilise matters. At the moment, he's more preoccupied with his own leadership and saving his own skin than governing in the national interest. And I think after 14 years, this is a pretty discredited government. He needs to name the date. But if he doesn't name the date soon, we could have a leadership election soon.
The Ministry of Defence says Grant Shapps was forced to abandon a trip to southern Ukraine last week for security reasons. British intelligence warned of a credible missile threat from Russia, saying the Kremlin had got wind of his visit, according to the Sunday Times. Mr Shapps was due to travel to Odessa a day after a missile hit the city, while the Ukrainian president and the Greek prime minister were visiting. 5 people were killed in the explosions, according to Ukrainian authorities. Meanwhile, the Latvian Prime Minister has told the Sunday Telegraph that Britain should consider conscription and a total defence model to deter Russian aggression. Latvia reintroduced the model last year, with all able-bodied men required to complete 11 months of military service. However, in January, the UK Armed Forces Minister James Heappey said any talk of the UK introducing conscription to the army if NATO goes to war with Russia was nonsense. The widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was cheered by voters outside the Russian embassy in Berlin. Yulia Navalnaya was protesting on the final day of voting for the country's next president. Vladimir Putin, who's been in power since 1999, is expected to win another 6-year term with a landslide victory. The election comes just over 2 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Work on the M25 in Surrey is on schedule to reopen for Monday rush hour. National Highways says good progress is being made after the unprecedented closure. Motorists reported miles of tailbacks yesterday on the approach to the 5-mile closure between junctions 10 and 11 in Surrey. A volcano in Iceland has erupted for a 4th time in 3 months. Previous eruptions destroyed roads and forced a town to evacuate. Fountains of molten rock soared into the night sky from fissures in the ground. Authorities had warned for weeks that an eruption was imminent just south of Iceland's capital, Reykjavik. And Steve Harley, best known as the frontman of British rock band Cockney Rebel, has died at the age of 73.
Come on, Mercedes, to make me smile.
The band enjoyed success in 1975 with the #1 hit, Make Me Smile. Steve Harley had still been touring until recently, but cancelled dates to have treatment for cancer. His daughter Greta says he died peacefully with his family by his side. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Dawn.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Now let's get straight into today's stories, shall we? A Conservative MP, Elliot Colburn, left the House of Commons in stunned silence last month when he revealed details of his suicide bid during Prime Minister's questions. He sat down for an interview with Gloria De Piero, describing his feelings in the build-up to trying to end his life in December 2021.
Elliot Colburn, Conservative MP since 2019. Last month, there was quite a moment at Prime Minister's question time when you stood up to ask a question and in which you revealed that in December 2021, so about 2.5 years ago, you tried to take your own life. Why did you make that statement in Parliament?
To be honest, I didn't make the decision really until that day that I would have done if I was lucky enough to be called. You know what it's like, it's a lottery system. We don't know if we're going to get called that day or not for sure. So I had been thinking about it for a while. I'd been very blessed in my recovery since 2021. And I just started to pick up and notice that, particularly through constituency casework and things like that, that even if people weren't bringing up mental health, it seemed to be a feature of actually quite a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So something just said, you know what, now might be a good time for you to share this experience that you've had. I felt like I was in a strong enough place to start talking about it. I hadn't said anything outside my immediate family since it happened. So something just said, you know what, I think you're in a good enough place to share your story now and hopefully start a bit of a conversation about what we might be able to do for other people about it. I didn't really know what to expect, but something just felt right that day. But you know what it's like with PMQs. You have to sort of read the room. You don't know if it's going to be the right moment for a certain topic or a certain something. So I have to admit, I did have a backup question just in case I didn't feel like it was right yet. And the PM wasn't aware of what I was going to say outside of the broad topic around suicide prevention. So I can't say that it was something that I'd been building up to for a while or planning necessarily, but something about that day felt right. And I was lucky enough to be called by the Speaker, and there I go.
Wow, that's remarkable that you weren't sure up until that last moment whether you were going to reveal it. I remember watching it and, you know, we were like, oh my gosh, that is a brave thing to do. I was with a couple of other MPs at the time. Tell me as much as you're comfortable to tell me. What led you to the point where you thought, there's no other way, I want to take my own life?
That had been building up throughout most of 2021. It began, I suppose, what you'd call quite almost low-level periods of anxiety or feeling depressed or down. I didn't think it was anything unusual or outside the normal day-to-day stresses of the job, things feeling difficult or whatnot. But as the year went by, those sort of negative thoughts became more and more extreme. And I started telling myself things like, you know what, you're not wanted by other people around you. My relationships at home, my relationships at work, all started to really start to crumble. They all became really difficult. And I began isolating myself because that's what I was telling myself that other people wanted. I said to myself that they didn't want me around, and it was completely irrational now looking back. And it got worse and worse as the year went on. I had a number of death threats come through that year, which were new to me at that time. become more accustomed to them now, but at that time they were a fairly new experience for me. And all of this just fed into this awful thought cycle and culminated in a night in December where, again, I didn't wake up that morning thinking, today's the day I'm going to do it. I guess the same with asking my Prime Minister's question, really. Something happened that day where everything just snapped into place and I felt as if there's no point going on anymore. You know, there's absolutely no point. You are unwanted. No one wants to see or hear from you, and you cannot do anything right. So why waste everyone else's time and your own time? You might as well remove yourself from the equation now. And after hours of stewing on that day, I took out my notepad from my bag. I wrote a goodbye message and tried to do something really stupid. And I'm glad it didn't work, is all I can say. I'm really glad it didn't work, but I can't say that I'd been planning necessarily to do that, but I guess that day everything came at once. Everything felt like it was on me that day and did something really silly.
What happens the next day after you attempt to take your own life?
It was all a bit of a whirlwind. I was taken to hospital that night, to St Helier, which is our local A&E. I was assessed for physical damage first to check that what I had done hadn't left anything that required any more intervention. Once they were happy and once they'd looked at me, they then referred me to Springfield Hospital in South London, which is a mental health hospital, where I stayed for a while. And when I woke up the following day in Springfield, because all of this happened overnight, I was in a bit of a daze, really. I can't really describe the feeling. I was feeling silly. I was feeling guilty. Part of me was upset, I think, that I hadn't managed to do it. But another part of me had seen the pain that it had obviously inflicted on my family that had found me and felt unbelievably guilty about that. And it was not a good place. I still fear how I felt in those few days, immediately before and immediately afterwards. And I never want to feel like that again. It was scary. I never ever want to go back to that place. And so the next day was a real whirl. In fact, the next few weeks, really, as I was released from hospital and I was put on a longer term path of recovery, those early days were still quite difficult because I was still trying to process my own feelings and why I'd got so low, but also the guilt of what I had put my loved ones through and what they'd experienced too. And I still feel upset about what I put them through. I just wish that I had spoken to somebody beforehand and hadn't got to that point.
That's interesting. So if somebody, and we know how big a issue suicide is for men, I think it's the biggest killer of men under 50.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a huge issue for those people who are watching this and who can see where the path that they're on and where it may lead. What are your words? What can you tell them? How can you help?
I always say if I had a crystal ball in that moment where I was feeling at my lowest, the thing I always wanted to know was, will everything be okay in the end? Does everything work out? And of course the answer is yes, everything does. Things have a way of working out, they really do, and nothing is ever as bad as all that. For me, the thing that I didn't do, which I think would have really helped, is start to talk to somebody, anyone. Doesn't have to be a professional, can be a friend, a loved one, a colleague, anyone. That isn't going to solve everything, of course it's not. And of course these things do take longer. Recovery can be measured in a very long space of time. It can take a very long time for people, and some people may always need, for the rest of their life, some kind of help, whether it be medication or therapy or counselling. Some people may have a faster recovery, but it all starts by opening up. And that's what I didn't do. And that's what I wish I had done if I'd have just spoken to someone about how I was feeling, because looking back now and when people tell me, you know what, I did think you were closed off during that period, I noticed a change in you, I would just wish you'd said something. Yeah, I wish I'd said something as well. It is reliant on us looking out for each other as well. Of course, it's a two-way street. But if you can find that energy and that strength to just say something to someone, I think you will feel a lot better and you will start your journey. You really will start your journey. And that's what I wish I'd done anyway.
Do you think your job, the pressures of being an MP, do you think it in any way contributed to the decision you took?
I think it would be naive not to say yes, absolutely. The job definitely took its toll. As I said, that year, there were a number of threats that had come in, which was new to me. And whilst I've become accustomed to that now, sadly, at the time it was something that I wasn't really sure how to deal with and how to respond to. But yeah, the job definitely took its toll. It was a shame because I do love doing it. I absolutely love doing it. And you get to do and experience and meet people in a way that I never thought I'd have the opportunity to. So it's a shame that I lost sight of that at that time, because the job definitely has more good days than bad, and I love doing it. But at that time, I couldn't see the wood from the trees.
And final question, I found this chat totally mesmerising, and I'm so glad that we're able to do it because you are still here. As a result of you speaking out, you'll have had a significant response inside Parliament, outside Parliament. Is there one, perhaps two things, people, remarks, reach outs that have stuck with you that you thought, gosh, that's powerful, or I didn't expect that person to get in touch?
It was overwhelming, the response. I didn't really know what to expect, but just the overwhelming response from colleagues, from loved ones, from constituents as well was just amazing. I absolutely was blown away by it. But there was one example, actually, of a gentleman who called my office, who I wasn't there at the time. A member of my team picked up the phone, and he'd said that he was planning to take his own life that day. He'd made that decision. He'd been brought to that low point, but he'd seen that Prime Minister's question. I'm not quite sure if it popped up on his newsfeed or how, but he saw it and he decided to start his recovery journey and get in contact with a professional to try and get help and not go ahead with it. And it just completely blew me away that people would trust me with that story, and to hear other people's stories, either of their own mental health struggles or people they've lost along the way. It just really was humbling that people felt comfortable sharing that with me. And I sincerely hope it will encourage others to speak out about their own experiences, or if they are in that bad place, because as I said earlier, I think starting that conversation is the beginning of a journey. It was for me, and I think it can be for other people as well.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
I think you'll helped so many people, and I think it's incredibly courageous that you chose Prime Minister's Questions to speak out. Elliot Colburn, thank you.
Thank you.
Very sobering interview there, and just a reminder that 3 in 4 suicides in the UK are by men, and the highest rate is between the ages of 45 and 64. If you are struggling, there is help out there. The Samaritans are there 24 hours a day on 116 123. That's 116 123. And you can see Gloria's full, very moving interview with Elliot on our website now. Now, we move on. The leader of the Lib Dems, Sir Ed Davey, has called for once-in-a-generation election. He called for transformational change to bring the blue wall tumbling down. He accused Labour and the Conservatives of tinkering around the edges and trying to cloak themselves in the costume of change, but really trying to keep things the same. He also poked fun at the Prime Minister over the calling of the election. Let's have a listen to that one, shall we?
Now, of course, we don't yet know when election day will be. We don't know because it's in the hands of just one man. It's pretty much the only thing left that Rishi Sunak controls. He certainly doesn't control his party, certainly not his cabinet, certainly not the healthcare crisis or the economy.
I'm just going to go straight to GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley to bring us up to speed on what is happening in Lib Dem land. Olivia, take it away.
Well, yeah, I'm here in York for the Lib Dems annual spring conference. It's basically a sort of jamboree for the members, and the members were certainly very enthusiastic about what Sir Ed Davey had to say. The leader of the Liberal Democrats made repeated comparisons between this election and the 1997 election, where he, Davey, won his own seat. Seems quite interesting. It looks as though the Lib Dems are looking forward to a landslide, potentially, Labour government. Tying in with that, pretty much all of the direct attacks that Ed Davey made today were at the Conservatives. He mentioned by name a whole lot of Conservative MPs. There are lots of Conservative seats which the Lib Dems are targeting, including a number of cabinet seats, Jeremy Hunt's seat, Michael Gove's seat, Penny Mordaunt's seat. Meanwhile, Labour got a pretty easy ride from Lib Dem leader Ed Davey. Are we perhaps gearing up for some sort of pact, whether it's an official pact between Labour and the Lib Dems or a bit of tactical voting on the side? Either way, it was definitely Rishi Sunak and his government who Ed Davey wanted to twist the knife into.
Olivia, thank you very much there for bringing us up to speed on the Lib Dem conference this afternoon. Now, I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News Sunday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. A nurse has claimed that not all people who have babies might call themselves a she or a woman or even a mum. So I want to know, do you think a man can give birth? All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So after his mad dash to see his father last week, Prince Harry predictably went on TV to talk about it. He gave his first interview to Good Morning America, whilst apparently being filmed by a cruise that were doing a documentary on the Invictus Games. He didn't disclose his father's diagnosis, but frankly, even the fact that he was on TV talking about it was concerning. No wonder they're keeping him at arm's length. This is what he said.
How did you get the news that the king was ill?
I spoke to him.
And what did you do next?
I jumped on a plane and went to go and see him as soon as I could.
How was that visit for you emotionally?
Look, I love my family. The fact that I was able to get on a plane and go and see him and spend any time with him, I'm grateful for that.
An illness in the family can have a galvanizing or sort of reunifying effect for a family.
Absolutely.
Is that possible in this case?
Yeah, I'm sure. Throughout all these families, I see it on a day-to-day basis. The strength of the family unit coming together.
He also said that he loves his family, but then he said that he had his own family in America. So which family does he love? The late Queen's last few years of life were marred with accusations of racism, which Harry later backtracked on, claiming that they hadn't actually used the word, so inadvertently admitting to gaslighting us all. But the Sussex's stock is falling in the States, and the only thing that makes them interesting is their proximity to the royal family. And now the king is ill, Harry has even offered to muck in and take on official duties to help his father. Look, I want to see reconciliation and love and joy, but I'm afraid Meghan has yet to even speak to her father as far as we know, and Harry didn't apparently even reach out to his brother. Whilst his dad might fall for it, I doubt William will be as soft. Good luck with that, Harry.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, brace yourself, people. Can men give birth? Simple question. On an NHS-sponsored podcast, a nurse claimed not all people who have babies might call themselves a she or a woman or a mum. Going on to say, while reviewing teenage pregnancy documents, she noticed some of their language was incredibly gendered. Huh? So I want to know, it's simple. You know, we've done, can men have penises? Now, okay, can women have penises even? Can men give birth? I'm going to come to you, Amy, on this one first. I get quite annoyed about this subject because I do believe women's health can suffer because of the confusion about language in healthcare. Men can't give birth, can they?
I will agree with you that women's health is suffering, and on the whole, maternity services are terrible at the moment, so it's pretty dangerous for anyone to be giving birth. But it is also true that there are some men who choose to have children, who choose to get pregnant and have children. There's There's a man called Freddie McConnell, and he made a film called Seahorse, which is about his journey as a legal man having a baby. And I think, when you say the question, can men give birth? Of course, it sounds instantly absurd. It does. And I think it's framed that way, isn't it? It's like the whole, can a man have a penis? And it's designed to make you sound silly and eccentric.
How did this guy have a baby?
However, these people are very, very few. This is how Keir Starmer got in all that trouble, isn't it? Because he was like...
being a bit confused
But it's not true to say a man hasn't given birth, because Freddie McConnell is a man by law,
How did he
gave birth.
How did he have a baby? What was implanted into his body?
So it's a biological woman to start with.
Yeah.
So it's a woman.
Transitioned. So according to the 2004 Gender Recognition Act, he's now a legal man. Thus, Dawn, humans are complex. Humans are diverse.
So he was a legal man, but not a biological man. Is that right?
I mean, he had transitioned. He had transitioned.
He was a biological male.
And there are a lot of people...
to be a woman and gave birth.
Yes,
there are
so
a lot
he wasn't
of people
a biological man.
Well, not a lot. There's actually not. Because there's a vanishingly small number of men who choose to have children, who choose to use their reproductive organs that they have kept post-transition to give birth.
Yeah, but biologically, a man can't give birth, can he?
I mean, is that the question?
Well, the question is straightforward. Can men give birth?
Well,
and a biological man can't give birth unless he goes to some clinic in Switzerland and they reconstruct his body.
But, that example I give of Freddie McConnell, in every respect, he's a man, right? He's transitioned to a man. The law recognises him as a man. But
not biologically. There's a huge difference.
Biologically, he's a transgender man. Right?
Biologically, he's a man who has
a transgender man. So if we wanted to complete the sentence, transgender men can give birth.
This is my issue with this, right? Okay, this is where it gets confusing, because Freddie, and I've worked with Freddie, and is a lovely person, but was born female, transitioned to become a man. Now, we're getting confused about who's transitioning where and what you call them. Now, imagine, I was saying earlier on, I live in Tower Hamlets, and a lot of the healthcare notes there are written to be gender neutral. There's a lot of women in my area who don't have English as a first language. It's confusing for us. This is my issue with this. I think women's healthcare is suffering because we are afraid to use the word woman.
I saw a great interview this weekend. I can't remember which colour magazine it was in, but it was Sharon Davis, the swimmer, who has campaigned endlessly to try and stop biological men entering women's world of sport,
She's campaigned to erase trans rights and to prevent trans women from partaking in
I don't believe so. I think she's tried to protect women-only spaces from men. I mean, look, she's got a point, because she could have been an even greater Olympian had she not been beaten by somebody who, to this day, she believes was not fully a woman that she was racing against. But the point is, she interviewed Caitlyn Jenner, and I think Caitlyn Jenner is one of the most sensible voices on the planet about the trans issue, because she's very famous, she's not at all militant about it, she tells it as it is, and she does say a trans woman is not a man. A trans man is not a woman.
You already get mixed up.
No, but she says a trans... I read the interview, it's very interesting. A trans man cannot be a woman. Now, if she says it, I think that absolutely defines it. And instead of anybody, you know, wanting to accept that, they go off into literally reams and reams and reams of crosstalk and
well,
this and that. And
I just listened
some
to
of the
law
arguments that
over
you put
Caitlyn
in.
Jenner. Like Freddie McConnell's passport says male on it, and that's all. That's as simple as it is to me. That person, the law, the country, every experience that he has in this world is male, and he also had a baby.
Yeah, but anybody who wants to...
And at the time, he did get... he said he fell out with, I think it was one of his parents, because they said, but surely this is the most feminine, womanly thing you can do, to have a baby. So they felt like it was at odds with the masculinity. And it actually completely fractured that relationship. And he said the desire to be a parent is completely separate to your innate gender that you feel in your identity that is so immutable and something that you just cannot change. His desire to be a parent put that they were separate.
Amy, where do you stand?
So, you know, even he's admitting that it's quite a confusing concept.
But where do you stand, for instance, on the women's changing room issue? You know,
But I just want to take it back to this because I saw an article I had kept in my understairs. I kept a newspaper from 2001, right? But it was something that I cut out. And on the other side, it was from The Sun, and this was 2001, and it said, lesbian couple have baby. This is mad and outrageous and impossible. And it was all the things we say at the moment about trans men giving birth. And I thought, this is what it is. We're just taking a while to catch up. And really, in 2001, you imagine, oh, we've always been progressive about same-sex couples. We really weren't. We really weren't. And the rhetoric around trans people now is similar to that around same-sex parents in the noughties.
I don't agree with that. I think there's a huge amount of acceptance, understanding, tolerance, but I just can't... When somebody asks me a question, can men give birth, I can't say how anybody can possibly answer in the affirmative.
It seems counterintuitive, that's why.
We have to go to the news now, but what do you think? Do you think a man can have a baby? Biologically give birth to a baby, a man? I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Sunday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. But first, here's the news headlines with Tatiana.
Dawn, thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Transport Secretary Mark Harper says Rishi Sunak will lead the Tories into the next election. It comes after senior Tories were reported to have attempted to downplay claims of a Conservative plot to replace the Prime Minister with Penny Mordaunt. The move would mean a fourth leader of the party in just 5 years. Mr Harper says that unlike Labour, the Conservatives have a plan on delivering for the country. The Ministry of Defence says Grant Shapps was forced to abandon a trip to southern Ukraine last week for security reasons. British intelligence warned of a credible missile threat from Russia, saying the Kremlin had got wind of his visit, according to the Sunday Times. Mr Shapps was due to travel to Odessa a day after a missile hit the city, while the Ukrainian president and the Greek Prime Minister were visiting. 5 people were killed in the explosions, according to Ukrainian authorities. The widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was cheered by voters outside the Russian embassy in Berlin. Yulia Navalnaya was protesting on the final day of voting for the country's next president. Vladimir Putin, who's been in power since 1999, is expected to win another 6-year term with a landslide victory. The election comes just over 2 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Work on the M25 in Surrey is on schedule to reopen for Monday rush hour. National Highways says good progress is being made after the unprecedented closure. Motorists reported miles of tailbacks yesterday on the approach to the 5-mile closure between junctions 10 and 11 in Surrey. And Steve Harley, best known as the frontman of British rock band Cockney Rebel, has died at the age of 73.
Come up and sing it to make me smile.
The band enjoyed success in 1975 with the #1 hit, Make Me Smile. Steve Harley had still been touring until recently, but cancelled dates to have treatment for cancer. His daughter Greta says he died peacefully with his family by his side. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Dawn.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. There's plenty more coming up on today's show. But before I tell you what we've got lined up for you, Nana Queer Show is on later at around 3 o'clock. She joins us now. Nana, what's coming up on your show today?
Thank you, Dawn. Everyone's in green, of course. Happy St Patrick's Day. Yeah, so in the first hour we'll have the clash. We've got quite a few different debates, obviously talking about the trans issue because, you know, this doesn't look like it's going away. And I think a lot of people seem to have lost sense of logic and reality. We're going to have a catch-up with Olivia at the Liberal Democrat conference. And I have an amazing mystery guest. I can't give you too many clues, but he has reignited his career after a serious relationship breakup. And he'll be my 5 o'clock mystery guest. I bet you're wondering who he is. So stay tuned.
Sounds a cracker. Thank you so much, Nana. And remember, you can get in touch about all the topics we've been discussing today by emailing on gbviews@gbnews.com or messaging on our socials @gbnews. Lots more coming up on today's show. Happy St Patrick's Day, everybody. As you've noticed, we're all wearing green. Here, up and down Ireland, people are celebrating the national holiday and even more after they won the Six Nations last night. Congratulations. All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson and you're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, for the week ahead, it's remaining changeable across the board. For most of the week, it will be fairly mild, but towards the end of the week into the weekend, it does look like it will turn briefly colder. So for the rest of Sunday, still got low pressure generally in charge across the country. But any showers generally fizzling out as the evening goes on. So some fairly clear skies developing across England and Wales, but it doesn't last long in the west. Another band of cloud and rain beginning to work its way in. So by the end of the night, clearest of the skies out towards the east and maybe across Northern Ireland. And for all of us, it is going to be a mild one. Temperatures not falling much lower than 5 to 7 degrees. So into Monday morning, a bright start in the east, but the cloud and rain across central parts will move its way eastwards as the day goes on. Behind it, some drier and brighter weather for a time. This transfers towards the east into the afternoon, and that allows another band of cloud and rain to work its way in from the west. So quite a wet end to the day for Northern Ireland, but for many, another mild day, temperatures up to 17 degrees in the southeast. Tuesday, for a lot of us, is going to be a rather cloudy picture. Outbreaks of rain moving their way southeastwards. It does brighten up later on in the day across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but on the whole, middle of the week remaining unsettled. But for all of us, temperatures staying on the mild side for the time of year.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Happy St Patrick's Day, everyone. Wearing green. My surname's Neeson. There's a link there somewhere, isn't there? Today is the day for parades, Irish music and plenty of Guinness. Up and down Ireland, people will be celebrating the national holiday and even more after they won the Six Nations last night. Congratulations. So let's cross live to GB News Northern Ireland reporter Dougie B2, who is in Belfast. Doogie, where's your hat gone? You had a hat on earlier.
Yes. It's here. It's here. We'll put the hat on.
Top boy.
We'll put it on. There we go. How's that? That looks better, doesn't it?
Marvellous.
Yes. You can see behind us here, actually, the parade is arriving back into Belfast, and it has done a full circuit of the city, and it comes back in, and there are thousands of people gathered here to have a look at what is going on here. And these are all community groups, circus acts, and basically football teams. Everybody else has decided that they're going to put floats together and get involved in the parade. I'm sorry, I find it hard to hear you, but it is quite the day, and it is quite the weekend for Ireland, north and south, because, as you say, the rugby and then St Patrick's. But don't forget, we had some success in the Cheltenham Gold Cup, and then, of course, we have a bank holiday tomorrow, which will keep everything going even further, and it will be Hangover Tuesday.
Doogie, good luck with that hangover, my lovely, but I think you need to keep the hat on for the rest of the day. Enjoy yourself and try not to drink too much, young man. OK, thank you, Doogie. That's Doogie in Northern Ireland enjoying St Patrick's Day. Now, Mike, you were telling me a very interesting story about your experiences with the nectar of the Irish gods.
Well, it's Guinness, isn't it? And St Patrick's Day always used to fall in the middle of Cheltenham Week, and I went to Cheltenham for 20 years, OK? And for 5 years, I held the record of having the first pint of Guinness of the meeting on the Tuesday morning, 10:01. As the Guinness village opened, I'd get in there and have my picture taking the first pint. And sometimes that would go up to about 12 pints on the opening day.
12 pints?
Yeah, but that's the only time I ever drink it. I never drink it anywhere else. It just seems to taste good on St Patrick's Day in the Guinness tent, but anywhere else, if I take it, I don't like it. I'd have to spit it out. The other thing I want to say about that is, how much do you envy the Irish to celebrate their national day so wonderfully, so beautifully, so enthusiastically, when in this country, my country, England, nobody even knows when St George's Day is? And if we all went around celebrating, we'd all be called colonialists and Little Englanders just for celebrating our national day. The Irish aren't ashamed to do it, and we shouldn't be ashamed here in England.
Well,
so
you could do
let's have a celebration next year.
Get out your maypole, do a bit of Morris dance.
All on my own. All on my own. I don't think so.
Local democracy. See how popular it is.
Singing. OK, Amy, would you like a pint of Guinness?
Well, I remember when I was pregnant, my nan, who's since departed, used to tell me that Guinness was good for the baby.
Full of iron. No, full of iron.
Full of iron.
Yeah.
She encouraged me to drink Guinness.
Yeah.
That's my only anecdote about Guinness. But I do have an anecdote about St Patrick's Day.
Go on.
So, when I come on this channel, a lot of people the odd person on social media will say, why do you always try and disagree with everything? And I think, oh, she's wearing blue. She can't even join in with the St Patrick's Day and wear green. However, did you know this? That St Patrick himself actually originally wore blue. But then the day became associated with green because they called it the Emerald Isle, and it was known for the green rolling hills. But the original St Patrick himself wore blue.
Yeah, is that right? When I used to live in New York, I mean, St Patrick's Day parades there and celebrations were 10 times what you've just seen in Belfast and Dublin.
Oh, they love it.
But if you had the audacity not to walk around in green in Manhattan on St Patrick's Day, you were threatened badly, you know. What's wrong with you, buddy? I'm Irish. But they didn't know where Belfast was in relation to Dublin, you know what I mean?
Isn't that what President Biden does as well?
Oh, yeah,
He's
I'm Irish. Yeah, I'm Irish.
Related to
most people couldn't, point to it on the map, to be honest.
I'm wearing green, not wearing blue, because I got that one wrong, but Amy's probably got, I don't know, green knickers on or something. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Sunday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. A special exhibition at the V&A about Punch and Judy has described Margaret Thatcher as a villain, piling her in with Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden. Yeah, you might not agree with her politics, but, I mean, is Maggie Thatcher really that much of a villain? All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism. And parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine. Like, that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60
You'll suffer
fine.
the fine.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. Online learning was really not making up for that. So how could, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should
But also,
be
it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well, I
to
think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think they can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly, decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch, so we haven't had time to go through. I've got such a brilliant panel with me today, that getting through all the emails as well, but brilliant panels coming in. Hope you're having a really good St Patrick's Day. Going back to our earlier debate about conscription and should young people be willing to go and serve the country, especially with the threat from Russia coming up. And Ursula, good afternoon, Ursula says, get those young on benefits who won't work to do national service. So basically, lazy scroungers go and do national service. And David, I love this one, David, very funny. David says that you would never get our young generation for conscription. They would rather join Love Island. And Mark says, it's crucial that conscripted soldiers are trained separately from regulars. This is imperative. It also stops the argument that many people have against conscription. Meanwhile, there was one on social media, especially for you, Amy.
Oh, yeah.
This is from Anna, and Anna says, a biological man can never be a woman by definition when a woman is an adult female. There's only one sex that can give birth, and that's a biological woman.
Is that Helen Joyce texting in?
Pardon?
Sounds just like, is it Sex Matters?
No. It's a lady called Anna. So thank you for all your messages. Do keep them coming up. Now, my favourite story of the day. Was Margaret Thatcher a villain? Now, bear with me. A special exhibition at the V&A on British humour discussing Punch and Judy puppets, keep up, said the following. Over the years, the evil character in the Seaside Puppet Show has shifted from the devil to unpopular public figures, including Adolf Hitler, Osama bin Laden and Margaret Thatcher. To offer contemporary villains, they say. But is it fair to pile Margaret Thatcher, no matter what you thought of her politics, OK, with Hitler, a genocidal maniac, and Osama bin Laden, probably one of the worst terrorists we've ever had. What do you make of this, Amy? I mean, you could disagree with her politics all you like, but I mean, to put her up there with Hitler?
Well, yeah, probably that is a little bit far. However, evil kind
There's
of...
always a but, Amy. There's always a but.
Well, I kind of want to see where they come... I always want to see where people are coming from, you know?
Right, yeah.
I think it depends where you're sitting, doesn't it? Because if you're a miner that lost their job, lost their livelihood, lost everything, yeah, I think you probably would regard Margaret Thatcher as evil. If you were a young gay teenager growing up under Section 28... yeah, you probably would think Margaret Thatcher was evil. There are plenty of pockets of society where she did untold damage, and I think it's probably justified for those people to hold rather
Margaret Thatcher
large grudges.
To Hitler.
Not comparable, but as a villain, as a they listed her as a contemporary villain, and I think in a lot of minds and in a lot of parts of the country, she certainly is regarded as a villain.
Mike, up there with Osama bin Laden?
I think it's an absolute disgrace, honestly, you know, to compare Mrs Thatcher to those sort of...
It wasn't a comparison.
What she was included in their company, and that is an utter disgrace, the sheer evilness of the people mentioned. And we've whitewashed history, because Amy said if you're a miner. Now, Harold Wilson, in his two governments in the 70s, closed down twice as many coal pits as Mrs Thatcher did. Mrs Thatcher was only continuing the work of Jim Callaghan and Harold Wilson. Arthur Scargill decided to try and bring the government down by ridiculously striking in spring when coal stocks were very high, and that caused the eventual closure of the coal industry, not Mrs Thatcher. She wanted to compromise and say, look, we've got to go on with the closures that the Labour government have started. No, Scargill wasn't having it. As a result, he smashed the coal industry, it became non-productive, and he closed it down. Now, isn't it odd, Amy? Sorry, just let me finish. Isn't it odd? At a museum called the Victoria and Albert, Victoria named after Queen Victoria, probably the greatest living woman, politician or monarch we've ever had, should be associated with this disgusting barb against Mrs Thatcher, who, frankly, saved this country from bankruptcy. When Jim Callaghan left power, the country was going down the tubes and we would have become what Greece became 10 years later.
I think when people remember Margaret Thatcher, they think of deindustrialisation, privatisation, which perhaps in the short term did save the country from bankruptcy, as you say. However, set in motion this whole policy structure of neoliberal economics, which doesn't invest in public services and it stagnates economic growth. So I think a lot of people would regard her legacy as what we're seeing today, in the fact that everything is absolutely stripped to the bone.
She turned us into one of the countries in the world.
But that, are you talking about in terms of...
I'm talking about wealth. In national wealth, we became...
At what cost?
The fifth biggest country in the world. At no cost. More people were working, more people were prosperous, more people owned their homes, more people owned shares. We were a very, very prosperous country.
Let's take that example of the home ownership.
Yeah.
So that's correct. She introduced right to buy. You could buy your council house. However, because that stock was never replaced, and now there are less and less and fewer council houses.
I totally agree with you.
Councils can't generate revenue.
I totally agree. And successive governments...
It's all in the hands of private landlords. So this privatisation may on paper look good for the country.
And Tony Blair had 13 years to start a house-building programme to replace those houses, which he approved of, because Labour didn't suddenly come in and say it's wrong to sell the council houses, but they had 13 years to replace the housing stock and they did nothing about it.
Well, maybe would you put him on the list?
What?
No, of course I wouldn't. I wouldn't compare anybody with Hitler and Osama bin Laden.
It's not comparison. It's a list of contemporary villains, and a lot of people regard Tony Blair as a villain for reasons that I would not share.
I don't think Hitler was a villain.
And a lot of people regard Margaret Thatcher for reasons that I do share.
Hitler was a genocidal maniac who tried to wipe out 1/3 of the world because he didn't like them. He wasn't a villain. A villain is somebody who is perhaps, you know, a little bit controversial and wicked.
So actually, maybe he's the one that's not in the right place on this list.
No, Mrs Thatcher's in the wrong place, and Hitler should be rightly condemned for the, you know, probably one of the worst people in history.
They did also, the V&A might have had a bit of woke history going back on this one, because it did also refuse, bearing in mind it's a fashion museum as well, they did actually turn down her clothing collection.
In 2015?
Yeah, absolutely, because they didn't consider her important enough.
Accused of refusing to exhibit items from the wardrobe of Mrs Thatcher as the first female Prime Minister. Not as Margaret Thatcher, but as the first female Prime Minister, and they turned them down.
Exactly, but unfortunately, we've run out of time.
That's just nasty.
Sorry, we've run out of time.
Section 28 was nastier. I think, come on.
Right, OK. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Sunday. These two have been absolutely brilliant, but don't go anywhere because there's plenty more coming up on GB News today. In just a moment, it's Fiery Debate with Nana Acquia, and at 6 p.m, it's Neil Oliver with Free Speech Nation at 7 and Mark Dolan at 9. Well, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. It's been wonderful having your company. Don't go anywhere. Nana's up next. Before we go to Nana, let's have a look at what the weather's doing for you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, for the week ahead, it's remaining changeable across the board. For most of the week, it will be fairly mild, but towards the end of the week into the weekend, it does look like it will turn briefly colder. So for the rest of Sunday, still got low pressure generally in charge across the country. But any showers generally fizzling out as the evening goes on. So some fairly clear skies developing across England and Wales, but it doesn't last long in the west. Another band of cloud and rain beginning to work its way in. So by the end of the night, clearest of the skies out towards the east and maybe across Northern Ireland. And for all of us, it is going to be a mild one. Temperatures not falling much lower than 5 to 7 degrees. So into Monday morning, a bright start in the east, but the cloud and rain across central parts will move its way eastwards as the day goes on. Behind it, some drier and brighter weather for a time. This transfers towards the east into the afternoon, and that allows another band of cloud and rain to work its way in from the west. So quite a wet end to the day for Northern Ireland, but for many, another mild day, temperatures up to 17 degrees in the southeast. Tuesday, for a lot of us, is going to be a rather cloudy picture. Outbreaks of rain moving their way southeastwards. It does brighten up later on in the day across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but on the whole, middle of the week remaining unsettled. But for all of us, temperatures staying on the mild side for the time of year.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in a great British giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight.